Alright guys, the second approach is you want to ask the audience a question and you want the entire audience to reply. Okay? So you don't want them to all start shouting the favorite pizza, because you probably won't be able to catch a single one out of it, especially if you have like 200 students in a room. What I always would recommend is something that isn't very vocal. So by show of hands or please stand up if. And these two approaches sound quite similar, but there is a clear difference and a clear reason why you would go for either one of them. So let's say by show of hands, how many of you, this approach can be applied to basically anything, right? But what I would like to use it is, because you want your audience to give an honest answer. The moment I decide to go with by show of hands is the moment I believe not the entire audience would actually show their hands or put on the hands in the air. So let's say I'm asking a question: who of you has ever been to a competitive swimming competition? And I would know that most of them would say no. So maybe just a few hands in a room of 200 people would ever have been there due to family or friends. But this is the moment I try and use the show of hands method, because it only shows a couple of hands in the air. The moment I believe that the entire audience, or at least 90 to 100% would agree upon it or have executed it. So I'm going to use the same example. Who of you have ever heard of the sport swimming? Then I would know most people would actually say yes. So instead of saying show by hands, I'm going to choose for something that's much more powerful, which is please stand up if you have ever heard of swimming, if you have ever eaten pizza. And this basically, by letting everybody stand up and look around for a moment, you could see that so many people are actually equal. And that's a very powerful approach in doing so. Of course, these examples are a bit, childish, whatever you want to say. And it can be exploited in many different ways as well. So let's say you're doing a presentation and let's take my subject of lying against yourself. I could use this in a different way as well, because I know everybody has slept in or ignored his alarm clock, right? And we kind of feel ashamed about it. We sometimes just sleep in or hit the snooze button too often. So I would say, so for everybody in the room, please stand up if you have ever hit the snooze button too many times back to back. And I think everybody will probably stand up in the room at that point. So that's the main approach. I have two different approaches for you guys to try out and figure out what works for you. The show by hands is a nice one, but I would recommend using it only if you think that, let's say, 50% or less are actually lowering their hands. And if it's like 80, 90, 100%, try and use the time. Okay, please stand up if. If the audience stands up, take your time, let them look around and see that they're not that special, that everybody is quite equal, no matter what culture or background they might have. Okay, so having these two approaches in there is a really easy tool to use. Then the third one, which I haven't mentioned yet, is a bit more tricky. And I'm going to use Obama as an example. Yes, we can. He managed to get the entire audience to say those 3 words. And he basically used a trigger for it. This means that you need to create a trigger in your audience. So let's say you want your entire audience to say no at a similar time and create this bonding feeling. So this is something you have to explain to your audience. So you're going to say, okay, whenever I'm asking a question and I think we can all agree that we have to say no on it, I want you all to say no. So whatever your question might be, make sure that you explain your audience and create a trigger. So whenever you want your audience to say no or say yes we can, make sure you explain the trigger towards them. So what Obama did at a point, he would say, whenever I ask a question, are we able to change? The entire audience would say, yes, we can. And this is really tricky and it's really advanced. And I actually struggle with explaining it for a moment. But the main idea is you want to make a trigger. So you want to ask a question in which the entire audience can agree upon the same answer and is going to say yes or no, or at least a short sentence which they can all follow up upon. If you feel comfortable in doing it, please make use of it. But these type of questions can be applied basically to any story. Might be not very applicable to a formal business presentation, but working in a larger audience, there are multiple ways in doing so, like I just explained.